Story 1. The Thing That Answered Back. I'd been hiking solo for 3 days in the Pisgah National Forest, North Carolina. Late October, leaves turning blood red, air crisp enough to bite. I was 28, recently divorced, and wanted silence. No people, no signals, just me and my tent pitched deep off-trail near a small creek. First night was perfect. Campfire crackling, stars so bright they hurt to look at. Around 2 a.m., I woke up needing to piss. I stepped out of the tent, flashlight off because the moon was full. That's when I heard it. A low whistle, like someone calling a dog, but melodic. 3 short notes, then silence. I froze. No other campers for miles. I whistled back once, half joking, thinking maybe it was another hiker. It answered, same 3 notes, but closer, maybe 50 yards away behind a thick stand of pines. My heart slammed. I backed into the tent, zipped it, and lay there gripping my knife. The whistling stopped. I told myself it was an owl or a raccoon. Fell asleep eventually. Next morning, I found footprints in the soft mud by the creek. Bare feet, human-sized, but the toes were too long, and they circled my tent 3 times before heading into the trees. I packed up fast and moved camp 2 miles deeper. Second night, no fire, just my headlamp and a book. Around midnight, the whistling started again. Same tune. Closer this time, I didn't answer. Instead, I sat perfectly still, listening, and then came the footsteps. Soft, deliberate, crunching leaves right outside my tent. A voice whispered, low and raspy, right against the fabric. "Why'd you stop?" I didn't breathe. My knife was in my hand, but I couldn't move. The voice repeated it, almost sad. "Why'd you stop answering?" I stayed silent until dawn. When light broke, I crawled out. No footprints this time. Just a single set of bare prints leading straight up to my tent door, then stopping. Like whatever it was had stood there for hours, waiting. I hiked out that day without stopping. Never whistled in the woods again, and sometimes, even in my apartment back in Asheville, I wake up hearing those 3 notes outside my window. Story 2. The Ranger Who Wasn't. I was camping alone in the Boundary Waters, Minnesota, early summer. Paddled in solo, set up on a remote island campsite. The ranger who checked my permit at the entry point had been friendly. Older guy, gray beard, said to watch for bears, but otherwise enjoy the peace. Third night, I was sitting by the fire when I heard a canoe scraping on the rocks down at the landing. It was after 11 p.m., way too late for anyone to be moving. I called out, "Hello?" A voice answered, same friendly tone as the ranger. "Just checking campsites. Mind if I come up?" I relaxed. Rangers do night check sometimes. I saw his silhouette against the water. Hat, jacket, the works. He stepped into the firelight, and something felt wrong. His uniform looked a little too clean. His face was the same, but his eyes didn't reflect the fire. They stayed flat black. He sat down across from me without asking. Asked how my trip was going. Normal questions. But every time I answered, he'd tilt his head like he was listening to something else. Then he said, "You know, people disappear out here all the time. Nobody finds them. Lake's deep." I laughed nervously. He didn't, just stared. I stood up, said I was turning in. He stayed seated. "Mind if I warm up a bit longer?" I went into my tent and zipped it. Through the mesh, I watched him. He didn't move for 20 minutes. Then he stood, walked to the edge of the firelight, and changed. His shoulders slumped, arms too long, head tilting at an impossible angle. He looked back at my tent and smiled with too many teeth. "I heard the canoe leave at dawn. When I finally crawled out, the only tracks on the landing were mine from the day before. No second canoe, no ranger footprints. I packed and paddled out the same day. Later, I asked at the ranger station about night checks. The woman laughed and said, "We don't do those, too dangerous." And our only male ranger with a gray beard retired 5 years ago. Story 3. Never hike after dark. I broke my own rule on day 4 of a solo trip in the Smoky Mountains. Got turned around chasing a sunset view, and darkness hit fast. Instead of making camp, I decided to push the last 2 miles back to my car using headlamp. The trail was narrow, rhododendrons pressing in on both sides. Around 10 p.m., I heard footsteps behind me, heavy boots matching my pace. I stopped. They stopped. I started walking faster. They sped up. I spun around, shining my light. Nothing but empty trail and black trees. Heart pounding, I kept going. The footsteps returned, closer now. Then a voice. Calm, male, southern accent. "Hey, buddy, wait up. I think you dropped something back there." I didn't have anything to drop. I started jogging. The voice called again, friendly. "Come on, man, it's dark out here. Safety in numbers." I ran. Branches whipped my face. The footsteps turned into running too. I could hear breathing now, ragged and excited. Then it started laughing, high, childish giggles that didn't match the deep voice. I burst out onto a road crossing, flagged down the only car I'd seen all day, an old couple. They let me in, shaking. In the rear view, I swore I saw a figure step out of the tree line, watching the tail lights. The couple dropped me at my car. Next morning, I drove straight home. A week later, I saw a news story. A hiker had gone missing in that exact section the same night. They never found him, but searchers did find a set of fresh boot prints that followed his trail for miles, then stopped dead in the middle of the path. Story 4. The Campfire That Burned Backwards. Deep in the Adirondacks, New York. I'd been alone for 5 days, loving it. One night I built a big fire because it was colder than expected. Sat there roasting a hot dog, feeling good. Then the fire changed. The flames started leaning away from me, towards the trees, like wind was blowing. Except there was no wind. The smoke curled backwards, too. I heard a child's voice from the darkness. "Can I have a marshmallow?" I jumped up. "Who's there?" No answer. Then again, closer. "Please, just one." I shone my light. A small shape, maybe 10 years old, standing just outside the firelight. Dirty clothes, no shoes, face pale. I asked if he was lost. He just repeated, "Marshmallow?" Something made me say no. I backed towards my tent. The kid didn't move, but his head tilted and he smiled way too wide. "Mommy says strangers are dangerous, but you seem nice." I zipped into the tent and killed the light. For hours I heard small feet circling the tent, whispering, "Just one. I'm so cold." At first light I looked outside. No footprints in the frost, but my bag of marshmallows was open and every single one was gone, even though the bag had been inside the tent with me. I left the rest of my food and hiked out. 2 days later, I read about a boy who disappeared from a family campsite 10 miles away. 20 years earlier. They never found the body. Story 5. The Last Camper. I found the perfect spot in Oregon's Tillamook State Forest. An old, overgrown campsite with a rotting picnic table and a fire ring. Looked like nobody had used it in years. I set up anyway. That night, around 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of a zipper. Not mine. Another tent being unzipped nearby, then coughing, someone clearing their throat. Then a man's voice muttering, "Damn rain, where's the damn tarp?" I sat up. I was alone. No other tents. But the sounds kept coming. Someone moving around, setting up camp, talking to himself about the weather, about his wife back home, about how he hated camping alone. I called out. The noises stopped. Then the voice answered, friendly. "Oh, hey, neighbor. Didn't see you there. Mind if I borrow some firewood?" I didn't answer. The voice kept talking, getting closer to my tent. "Been coming here since '98. Best spot in the forest. Quiet. Nobody bothers you." I grabbed my bear spray. The voice was right outside now. "You mind? Just a couple sticks. I'll pay you back in the morning." Then it laughed softly. "Course, you won't be here in the morning." I sprayed the tent wall blindly, heard a wet hiss and a scream that turned into static, like radio interference. Everything went dead silent. Morning came. No other campsite, no footprints, but carved into the old picnic table, fresh like done that night, were the words, "Welcome back. You're the last one." I burned the table before I left. Story 6. The Extra Set of Footprints. I was deep in the Pisgah National Forest up in northern Minnesota on a solo canoe trip. It was mid-June, black flies everywhere, but the lakes were glass calm, and I had a perfect little island campsite all to myself. No other permits issued for that section that week. The ranger made sure to tell me that. I liked the solitude. First 2 nights were peaceful. I fished, read by the fire, watched loons on the water. On the 3rd night, I stayed up late tending the fire. Around 1 a.m., I heard paddling. Slow, steady strokes coming toward my island. I grabbed my headlamp and called out, "Hello? Everything okay?" The paddling stopped for a second, then started again, heading straight for my landing. A canoe scraped on the rocks. I shone the light down there and saw a figure pulling the boat up. Tall guy, dark jacket, hood up. He didn't wave back, just tied off and started walking up the path toward my fire without saying a word. When he stepped into the light, something was off. His clothes were soaked like he'd been in the water a long time, but the night was dry. His face looked blurry almost, like I couldn't quite focus on it. He sat down on the other log without asking. "Mind if I warm up?" His voice was flat, no accent, no emotion. I said sure, but my gut was screaming. I asked where he came from. He pointed vaguely across the big lake and said, "Other side," got turned around. Then he just stared into the fire. We sat in silence for maybe 10 minutes. He never took his hood down, never asked my name. Finally, I said I was turning in. He nodded once and said, "Good idea. Woods get weird after midnight." I zipped into my tent and killed the light. Through the mesh, I could see him still sitting there, perfectly still, facing my tent now instead of the fire. He didn't move for hours. I dozed off eventually from pure exhaustion. At dawn, I woke up freezing. The fire was out. The guy was gone. His canoe was gone. But when I walked down to the landing, I saw the marks in the sand. 2 sets of footprints coming up from the water. One set was mine from the day before. The other set was fresh, matching the size of the stranger's boots. Except they only went one way. Up to my tent and back down again. No second set leading back to the water. Like he had just vanished after standing outside my tent all night. I packed in record time and paddled out. When I checked in at the ranger station, I mentioned the other camper. The ranger frowned and pulled up the permit log. "Nobody else has a permit for that lake this week. You were the only one." Then he showed me an old missing persons poster on the wall. A guy who disappeared on that exact lake 12 years earlier. Same build. Same dark jacket in the photo. The rangers said they never found the body or the canoe. I still don't know whose footprints those were. Story 7. The whistling that followed me home. This one happened in the Pisgah National Forest again, but a different section. The Shining Rock Wilderness. I'd been warned by locals not to whistle or make certain calls after dark. I laughed it off. I was 32, experienced backpacker. Thought I knew better. Day 3 of my solo trip, I set up camp in a beautiful little hollow near a stream. Golden hour light filtering through the trees. I was feeling good, so I whistled an old tune my dad used to whistle. 3 rising notes, then down, just for fun. The forest went dead quiet. No birds, no insects, nothing. That should have been my first clue. I shrugged and started cooking. About an hour after full dark, I heard it. The same 3 notes whistled back from the ridge above my camp. Clear, perfect pitch, closer than I expected. I whistled again. Half testing, half nervous. It answered immediately, but this time from the other side of the stream, maybe 30 yards away. Same tune, but slower, like it was mocking me. I killed the fire fast, got in the tent, and sat with my bear spray and knife. The whistling kept going all night. Sometimes far away, sometimes right outside the tent fabric. It never repeated the same rhythm twice. Sometimes it added extra notes, like it was learning my song and changing it. Around 4 a.m., it stopped. I finally slept. Next morning, I broke camp and hiked out. The whole way back to the trailhead, I kept hearing faint whistling behind me on the trail. Never close enough to see anything, just enough to keep me looking over my shoulder. I got home to my apartment in Charlotte 2 days later. First night back, around 2 a.m., I woke up to whistling outside my bedroom window. Same tune, 3 notes, then the changed version. I live on the 3rd floor. I haven't whistled since. And sometimes when I'm walking my dog at night, I hear those 3 notes echoing from the tree line across the street, getting a little closer every week.